Hello everyone, I just want to introduce our project called Recovery Through Activity, Implementation and Evaluation of an Online Occupational Therapy Intervention across Wales. Recovery Through Activity is a 12-week course designed to help people experiencing mental health issues to explore the different categories of activity as part of their recovery journey. This slide is actually a photograph of the 12 Windows project between Hywel Dda University Healthboard and the VC Gallery, where service users who'd actually attended the course developed this artwork representing the 12 categories of activity. So recovery through activity itself is usually developed face-to-face, or delivered face-to-face rather, and was being delivered across a number of health boards across Wales. But back in March last year, the OT leads across Wales met, and with the advent of COVID, we decided to look at moving this intervention online to create a choice of approaches when delivering recovery through activity. We wanted to ensure that participants had access to suitable online activities that they could continue to enjoy post-COVID, but we also wanted to make sure that we were actually developing a robust intervention with a robust set of evaluation tools as well. We were fortunate to have an OT lead in clinical practice and education from Aneurin Bevan, who carried out an analysis of all the outcome measures, which led us to using the role checklist version 3, looking at people's roles and identity and confidence in engaging in activities. We also wanted to use that as a post-course checklist as well for people to complete. We also use the being, belonging, becoming scale, or the 3B scale. This is an outcome measure that looks at people's willingness and ability to participate in activity. And also we wanted to use a patient-reported experience measure, which was developed by leads within the group. And this was about looking at the experience of virtual groups from a service user perspective and how they applied changes in their everyday lives after attending the group as well. I'm just going to hand over to Christine Fairfax now for the next slide.
So the aims of the project. So it was to create a virtual version of recovery through activity that was accessible to all despite those COVID restrictions, which were significant at the time, but are still prevalent, to provide individuals with early access to occupational therapy input. And this was really important, that it was regardless of their condition or their stage within the recovery process. It was to develop an evidence-based occupational therapy group intervention, which could be facilitated centrally, and this could cover sort of a wide geographical area, so it wouldn't matter where you were in that health board, that you could still have access to this group. To raise awareness of the online resources, and this was to support individuals then to carry out meaningful activities and looking for sort of opportunities for individuals to connect with others. At the time of COVID, we were bombarded with online resources, but this was a way to sort of filter through those and direct people to, quality resources that they could integrate then into their occupations. It was to have a standardised protocol with nationally agreed outcome measures for delivery of recovery through activity across Wales, which Nicky has touched on earlier, and to improve the number of referrals to occupational therapy from other members of the multidisciplinary team. And this was a really important aim of the project, and this was to be supported by the development of a website and downloadable materials. So recovery through activity really wanted it to strengthen the joint working between statutory and third sector services, and really making the best use of those community resources that we have around us, and just allowing people then and ensuring that they can access the right support at the right time, which, as we know, is a key element of prudent healthcare. So how did we do? So our achievements to date. So we got the outcome measures agreed across Wales. We developed the protocols for delivering the virtual recovery through activity group, and they were agreed across Wales. We produced information leaflets and posters. They were developed to promote that recovery through activity to staff and service users in areas such as the waiting rooms, during team meetings, or any opportunity really that an OT had to promote that within their teams. We increased the referrals to occupational therapy within the teams in which they were working, which was a significant achievement. Service user and staff agreement was developed, and this was to ensure the confidentiality and the suitability really for the course. Recovery through activity is being successfully delivered, which we are very happy to say, across Aneurin Bevan, Swansea Bay and Hywel Dda Healthboard. We have set up the outcomes database. This is through Microsoft Forms and Microsoft Teams, really collating those outcomes and having sort of a central place then where they are kept and that they can be used. The website itself is still under development, but we are very lucky to be working alongside a service user with excellent IT skills. And there are plans to deliver between 1 to 4 virtual recovery through activity groups per year per Healthboard. I'll now hand you over to Jessica.
I'm going to talk you a little bit through the All Wales Recovery for Activity timeline and our journey throughout the project. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about the outcomes and the challenges that we faced throughout this time. Following the generated idea back in March 2020, we set up a task and finish group to look at the start of the project and to really enable us to keep the momentum going and to allow us to offer that support to each other and allow us to offer that sounding board to set up systems and protocols and allow that task and finish group to kind of guide the project as we move forward. Throughout this journey, there has been some challenges. Following identification of the outcome and the experience measures, it was the obtaining of the funding throughout that, and actually different health boards had very different challenges in obtaining that funding as we move forward. It also allowed us, once we set up the virtual platform and we agreed that, we also had to allow access for all of our health boards to have access to the Microsoft Teams and the delivery unit throughout that as we move forward. There was also very much kind of, as we set up the look at the website and the task and finish group, there was a lot of lack of funding for developing this website. And actually following that, we had a lot of service user involvement, which has very much greatly helped with the website development and is a feather in our cap for that co-production as we move forward. We also, as we move forward, had a lot of kind of information governance, and that task and finish group allowed us to iron those out and to discuss and put those protocols and procedures in place. But following seeking advice, it allowed us learning opportunities to understand how that virtual technology comes into play with the information and governance around how to send out group emails, the confidentiality, and actually how to set up specific privacy notice and allowing service users and staff agreements that would all go across Wales as we all work together. Virtual recovery for activity, though, allows us to create a more sustainable model of intervention. And I think it really does allow us to be delivered more centrally. And I think when we come back to the website, I think that is one of the biggest parts within that, is that actually allows us to deliver that more from a central base and from an all Wales perspective. From a positive element, it really allows us to upskill our staff and to really utilise technology and to allow these skills to move forward within our everyday practice, and actually how to transfer these skills that we've learned throughout this practice into other areas that we move forward. It allowed us to very much develop resources that can be delivered across all Wales. And I think the virtual recovery for activity provides us opportunities to work and deliver interventions in collaboration with third sector agencies. And as you can see in the timeline, as we come more towards the March, the later 2021s, as Christine and as Nicky said, our virtual recovery activity have then started to come in fruition, and we've started to commence that. It's been a very long journey, but a very rewarding and challenging journey as we move forward. And I think we've overcome those challenges as we've gone throughout this timeline. Which leads me then very much on to the feedback. And I think for me, this is one of the nicest parts within the recovery for activity. It's been lovely to see the fruition and the journey of the recovery for activity, but actually to gain that personal service user and that staff feedback about what we've been implementing is a valued thing for us as a whole. And as you can see here, the feedback that we've come back has been very, very positive. Service users have gained confidence, and actually, like I said, they've seen the more the real me. And I think for us as a implementation of this group is very much around allowing people to connect more with their community and allow them to connect more back within the next steps of their recovery journey. And I think we've achieved that, as we can see from some of the feedback here, is that they've searched for things of their own accord, their own motivation, they've gained other ideas, and actually how they can carry this on after those groups and after those fruition. And I think for me, this feedback says a lot about the implementation of the recovery for activity program that we kind of set up. I'm now going to hand that back over to Nicky to finish off.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about my experience of being a Bevan Exemplar. First of all, it's been a fantastic opportunity to network with other like-minded individuals across Wales. And it's been quite inspiring, actually, to hear about the diversity of projects that have been put forward as part of Bevan Exemplars. And being part of that and having sort of the opportunity to network and share ideas has been phenomenal, actually. Having a strict timeline really has helped us to keep the project on track. I think without that, we might have been sidelined a little bit, particularly with some enthusiastic OTs around the table. You know, having a Bevan Exemplar has definitely enabled us to access funding that previously we might have found difficult to access, in terms of things like the outcome measures and in terms of getting processes in place as well. I think because health boards are you know, they recognise that Bevan Exemplars have got sort of a tight timeline to them. It certainly helped to move things along a little bit quicker than we'd normally experience. Having access to the training modules was really useful. And I found particularly useful the boxing up your innovation. It certainly helped me to identify exactly what we needed to sort of having our toolkit for delivering the course. And it really made me help. It really helps me to think differently then about how I put those sets of tools together. I was able to share some of that experience then with other members of the Task and Finish group as well, which is really great for discussion purposes. The only downside is it would have been really advantageous to be given more time for homework or developing responses, particularly in relation to the webpage and perhaps this presentation. Because it was an always project, it was really difficult to get everybody involved in that feedback. So, you know, more time would have been really advantageous for that. It was really helpful to have meetings with experts in the field. They provided really useful information that we could incorporate into the planning and development of the project, and have given us really good ideas as to how to take our website development forward as well. So they've been invaluable really throughout the Bevan Exemplar experience. And, you know, all in all, I would really highly recommend the Bevan Exemplar programme for anybody wishing to take an idea forward, particularly if it's something they've put on the back burner because they don't think they're going to get sort of the support for it. I think the Bevan Exemplar process gives you kudos really within the Health Board, and it certainly helps to get people behind you, and you get to hear about sort of projects and information resources that perhaps you wouldn't have heard from before. So thank you everyone for listening.
We will now have a Q&A discussion. Where do you see this going next?
Well, I've got to say, first of all, we need to get all the health boards sort of running the virtual groups, and that would be great. And I'm sure that's going to happen. You know, Cardiff and Vale are coming on board very shortly. So we've just got Powell and Betsy really to follow on from that. We also are hoping that the data set that we're collecting and collating from across Wales will help us to get some recognition really for this intervention as a valued intervention within the community mental health teams, but also within our acute inpatient wards as well. I think the fact that it's now allowing us to provide a blended approach to this this intervention, it's going to be open to a far wider audience of service users. And I think, you know, we're going to have sort of outcomes that are like for like, because we're all using a standardized protocol. There's no reason why we can't work quite closely with Cardiff University, get these outcomes collated and analysed properly into a paper for publication. So that's what we'd like to do.
Is the webpage an All Wales webpage or a Healthboard by Healthboard webpage?
So the webpage is still under development, and the way we see it is that you have an overall All Wales cover page with sort of drop-down boxes then, so people can then access their individual health board and also be able to access the sessions within those health boards that are coming up then, if you like, so they can kind of sign up to those sessions. We are hoping that we would be able to allow sort of participants on the courses to network as well, so they can actually support each other between sessions. We're still sort of overcoming some of the information governance sort of issues across the health boards as well. So as long as we can keep those discussions going and making sure that we're following due protocol, then hopefully we will be able to support a wider audience of people across each health board. I mean, obviously, some of the resources that are available for people online, what we've tried to do in each health board is to match them with local activities, with local providers, so that they can actually continue those activities after the lockdown restrictions are over. And that would be really difficult to do on an always basis. However, there will be access on an always basis, obviously, to the larger organisations like Mind, Hywel, you know, people that have got sort of an All Wales presence, really.
How do you think your projects can contribute towards the development of standards and guidelines for support in mental health?
I myself would love to see us developing, you know, a set of standards for OT interventions across Wales. It would be great if we could develop those pathways that would structure our service and actually give clarity to other healthcare professionals around us as well as to what our role is and where we're best suited really to work. I mean, our skill set is quite unique. And I suppose, you know, we're not very good at shouting out about what we can do. So I'm hoping that this project being in All Wales will help put us on the map a little bit and help people to realise that together we can make a big difference. Whereas, you know, if we stand alone as separate health boards, it doesn't seem to have the same influence really on commissioners and sort of service providers, if you like. And it would be lovely if we could get this work published for us to maybe contribute to the NICE guidelines in the future. I know that we have got an occupational therapist who recently developed the mental health rehabilitation guidelines, but there was no mention really of specific occupational therapy interventions within those guidelines. And I think this gives us an opportunity now to put recovery through activity, you know, on the map properly, and to really shout about the outcomes that we're getting from these groups. We know that the face-to-face groups are really positive, but we're hoping now by having additionality through the blended approach and through more choice for people, that it will raise the profile of this intervention.
How were the virtual sessions structured, and how were the interventions completed in the groups?
So what we found was that with recovery through activity, because of the way that it's written and the way that it's structured, it actually, the sessions themselves translated really well online. So we didn't really add anything into that. We just used what was there and used it sort of on a virtual platform. But what we were really aware of was making it sort of feedback when people had done the same group sort of face to face, and we were lucky in our health board, as in other health boards, there was lots of experience around about it, was that during a face-to-face group, was that it was a very collective experience for everybody, and we didn't really want to lose that. But obviously when you're working virtually, you're just a face on a screen rather than that collective experience in the group. So what we thought about doing, and what we did, and I know Aneurin Bevan did the same, was look at resource packs, so that we could so everybody had sort of one, something that was the same. So usually when you come to a group, isn't it, you're all sitting in the same room, you're all sitting in the same circle. We couldn't replicate that, but what we could do was that everybody in their own homes had something that was the same. So we incorporated that then into the sessions, so such as the self-care sessions. We had things like nail buffers, hand creams, trying to introduce that sort of sensory element into it, so you were all experiencing again that at the same time. When we were doing sort of any sort of craft work with them, if you were going to decorate something or write something, they had the same things there. So that was sort of taken out then, sort of every 3 sessions, they would have another resource pack, and that was one of the feedback that we had, that they loved that, they really enjoyed it. It got them excited about the next session. What am I going to be using these for? And then there was goal setting then at the end of each session. So we just encouraged people to, we'd either put something in the pack that they'd go out, like one of the things is sort of a list of 10 things that people can find in the community. So it was, sort of within the COVID restrictions, if you like, so they could go out for a walk, but they would either pick up these things or they would look at these things, and they'd come back then, and that was a collective experience outside of the group, something they'd done on their own. They'd use the skills that they'd learned to enable that, and then incorporate that into their occupation. So if they enjoyed the walk, well, that's something that they can carry on and do. So we worked off sort of in terms of finances, we didn't have a lot of money, so it was quite a low level. But Aneurin Bevan, they applied to for funding. So theirs was in collaboration with a third-party organisation, and the name escapes me at the moment, but they sort of did the same thing. So a resource would be dropped off. They were making sort of bird boxes, that sort of thing. Again, just incorporating that sort of collective experience, linking them then into sort of third-party services, right at the beginning. This was about what was happening in the community, incorporating that into occupation, looking at, that proximity in terms of help, support. They already know that it's out there, so that it become more than just sort of the group, really.
Could you discuss your experience using an all Wales approach and a blended approach?
Okay, so we're really fortunate within the OT community within Wales in that we've got an occupational therapy leaders network. So all the leads across Wales come together, and obviously over COVID that's been very much on a virtual basis, but that enabled us to really discuss that initial idea of bringing this together on an always basis. We were lucky to meet up with Catherine Purcell from Orient, who is very much looking at research and innovation across Wales as well. And she came to one of our meetings sort of back in March last year. So that was how we got it off the ground. The other thing we then did was we collated a list of contacts, really, like-minded individuals, enthusiastic OTs across all the health boards. And I then developed a task and finish group. So I chaired that group from the beginning and it's still going on now. We've been able to sort of establish a protocol. I mean, obviously, when we first came together, every health board was doing this differently. Some people were offering recovery through activity sort of prior to discharge from the community mental health teams. Other teams were sort of having a combined approach of offering it within acute services, but also at any stage within their recovery journey. So the initial barrier to overcome was, what was the agreed protocol? What were we going to prioritise really as part of this going forward? So the first thing we agreed was that, was there any disadvantages to offering this to somebody at an earlier stage within their recovery journey? And actually we thought, well, no, as long as they can attend a group activity, they wouldn't necessarily need to be seen face to face. It could be done on the computer. So those people perhaps who would have anxiety about attending a group scenario, it opened up the doors to those individuals perhaps earlier on in their recovery journey as well. And I think what was really good was that we were able to discuss together the barriers as we went along. So first of all, obviously, it was about getting the right licenses together for the role checklist version 3. There was a cost associated with licenses. So actually, we were able to almost I don't like to say name and shame, but it's almost like we were able to say that some health boards were able to get funding, and it gave the other health boards then the opportunity to go back to their service providers and their sort of heads of service to say, well, actually, they're managing to get this in Hywel Dda, in other health boards. So perhaps we need to catch up, and it's part of the Bevan Exemplar. So, we really do think that has helped a lot, in terms of getting people on track. I mean, things like getting the right team, the sort of IT platform together, that was really difficult as well. We've got some really rural areas within Wales. And so some areas were further behind really in terms of getting teams up and running. But that's been overcome now, and we've been able to manage that. And the final barrier that we found difficult to overcome was the information governance. As you can imagine, we've got different procedures for every different health board. So what we were able to do was we set up meetings with all of the information governance leads across the health boards individually. We actually were able to agree the sort of service user and staff agreement with them. And then the only difference that came into play then was actually having a different privacy notice at the end of every agreement. So when the agreement was sent out, there was a different privacy notice for each health board, depending on the procedure that they were following. So yeah, there was a lot of challenges, but I've got to say, it's been, I think the advantages of being able to network across Wales has been phenomenal. And, I've met some really great people, and we've got to know each other a lot better. And what it's allowed is for the OTs across Wales to actually support each other in this. So if other people have been from rural areas and they're thinking about developing this sort of activity or this intervention, they've been able to have mentors from across other parts of Wales and be able to overcome the barriers that way.